Hello, everybody, and welcome to Teachers in the Dungeon. I'm Tom Gross.
And I am Dan Ream, here to spread chaos and destruction.
That is the plan for the day in the dungeon here. And welcome to everybody who's listening today, and welcome to the dungeon. This is Teachers in the Dungeon. If it's your first time, thanks for checking out the show. We hope you like it. If you have comments, we have an email, teachersinthedungeon@gmail.com. We're also on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Teachers in the Dungeon. On Twitter, we are at Dungeon Teachers, and don't miss our YouTube channel that will be filled with malicious creatures for this show. Mm-hmm. It is our Monsters series that we are diving into today, and for the topic of our monsters, I'm tossing it back to Dan.
Repulsive, sadistic creatures squirm out of their burrows like maggots or worms, gibbering and lusting for blood, driven on by the cruel lashes of hulking, militaristic brutes. They laugh coarsely at the pain they inflict on the lesser kindred, mocking their stature and stupidity. Meanwhile, large, hairy nightmares have moved with surprising stealth among the camp of the targeted foes, casually crushing the skulls of any they find sleeping. Hating and hated by all three races seem the most obvious of villains, without one redeeming feature. And yet, even here there is tragedy, for they were not always thus.
Excellent. So I'm going to just hypothetically ask, anyone guess what our monster of the day is? Goblins and goblinoids.
Yes.
Very good.
I'm trying to remember why we decided this would be good for August.
Oh, because we're going back to school.
With all the little goblins?
With all the little goblins.
Okay.
That's right. Except we don't hate our little goblins in our school. We just know that they need some guidance.
Yes, they're chaotic.
And whether they're the best or they're the worst, there's guidance to be given. So goblins it is for the first month back to school. And you have had the opportunity to do the research.
Yes.
I am just looking at one page of the monster manual. So as in true form, I am unprepared, and Dan is prepared.
No. This is the history teacher went out and did a deep dive a little bit into, which just means I looked at a couple sites online and found a couple of different conflicting theories about the goblins and descriptions and things.
That brings some conversation. Mm-hmm. And I just went the chaotic route, like a goblin. I'm just coming in. I'm going to bash some skulls along the way. So, Dan, tell us a little bit about how we're going to do this conversation. I know it's chaotic, but let's have a little bit of order.
So I think probably the best thing is just discuss the description a little bit and what makes the three major races different from each other.
Okay.
There are a few other minor ones, but there's not too much out there on them. So I don't know that we'll spend a lot of time on them. And then we'll go into the origins, because there are actually two very distinct theories as to how goblinoids came to be.
Okay. So what should we expect visually, their descriptions?
So first of all, one of the quotes from one of the canon texts is, if you want soldiers or thugs, hire hobgoblins. If you want someone clubbed to death in their sleep, hire bugbears. If you want mean little fools, hire goblins.
I can picture that in my head. That's great.
Right. So they range from about 3 feet to 7 feet. And working up, the goblins, of course, are the tiny ones. Mm-hmm. The hobgoblins are human-sized, and the bugbears are larger.
Okay.
They are all lewd, cruel, sadistic, and power-hungry. As 5th edition has matured, so has the complexity of most of the races. These were listed early on as easy cannon fodder that players can kill with no moral qualms, because they're just evil through and through. Yeah.
I would agree with that. When I think about, there really were two creatures that in my play early in this, well, I guess there were three at the time. In 1st edition, it was orcs, goblins, and kobolds. Those are the three, just, you knew you were going to face one of those three as a first level character somewhere along the way. And so goblins have remained that way. Orcs have gotten tougher through the years. Kobolds have a little bit more purpose in their lives. They've got something they follow. They have an organized structure, at least generally they do. And goblins have just remained sort of tribal and one for all. Or no, other way around, one for themselves.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I think it's interesting that when I fight them as a player, I never think like, oh, I'm harming something. I'm just getting rid of something that's bad in the world.
See, and yet you as a DM don't allow that. The very first adventure we ever ran, you ran for us, we had to help some kobolds against some goblins.
That's right.
So that immediately, and the way you role play goblins, they're more mischievous than.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think it depends on the level of character too, because they're going to behave differently.
Right.
You know, they're bullies. So first level party, they're going to try to bully and be awful too.
Right.
But where we are now, level 8 or 9, when we see them, we tend to be a little more, oh, we'll talk to you. We're not scared.
Yeah. And the goblins are doing everything they can to stay alive. And so they're a little bit more manipulative.
Yeah.
Or try to be more manipulative. They will play along with the characters because they're looking for that opening to be able to do something awful. But yeah, I think goblins are fun to role play because they are kind of silly and stupid. Mm-hmm. They really are the what do you call it? The bottom of the rung, I suppose.
Yep.
But they're not intelligent-less. What is their intelligence here? I mean, they have a 10, so that's average intelligence. Mm-hmm. So they have a sense of being, they have a sense of mortality and all that kind of stuff. So I think, I personally think they're fun to play as a DM. And then when we made our monster group, I chose a goblin as my character. Gnutskenem is a goblin. So I also think that the images that show up of goblins are interesting. In the 5th edition or in the monster manual, they have flesh-toned skin. Mm-hmm. I've always pictured them in my head as being more green skin.
Yeah.
Paizo.
So does AI. When I ask it for it to create goblins, is always green skin.
Okay, nice. Because I know in Paizo, the goblin is kind of their like spokesperson creature.
Oh.
And so that and something that's a little bit more like a kobold or a dragon, humanoid dragon. But theirs is green as well. And they have space goblins and other types of goblins. But so goblins are in the mythology of things, they're very diverse, I think.
I think they're a good choice for a DM to use because they give you a lot of flexibility. Mm-hmm. It's always fun to play against type, but that requires that introduces trust, distrust in the party, and you've got to work with that. Mm-hmm. Goblins, a party is gonna expect them to be either just awful or they might be goofy. Right. And so you can run with that however you want, mm-hmm. I think pretty easily, or just have it turn on a dime because they are chaotic. Right. Yeah, they're playing off this goofy persona, and then before you know it, they're backstabbing you or stealing from you or something like that. And of course, that's one of the memes from D&D is Bobble and the Goblin. Oh, I don't know that's just a stand-in for any NPC that the DM introduces for a one line, and the company gets completely obsessed with them and wants to know everything about them, and so the DM has to come up with a name on the spot, and a backstory, and all of that. So I think that seems to be pretty common in the D&D world, that goblins are beloved rapscallions. Yeah. So let's talk. I think something that will help with this is what is the background? You said that there are sort of two camps. Well, they're tied together with Bugbears and Hobgoblins. Oh, okay. Yeah, let's move on to them then. Yeah, let's get those. There's probably not as much to talk about with them because they don't have such a central place, I think, in the hearts of D&D folk. So let's do the Bugbears next. They are the thing that's kind of cool about them is they're gigantic and stupid, but they're also very stealthy. And that's surprising, but kind of a cool surprising, I think. And there's not too much more to be said about them other than that I know of, other than for them, murder is a holy tradition. Oh, so they see. I mean, again, this is the evil through and through. I think more distilled, that our normal social values are just completely flipped on their heads. Okay, rather than preserve life as a duty, they take life as what they see as a religious duty. I see. Yeah, I see that they're not particularly intelligent. Where a goblin is a 10 intelligence in the Monster Manual, bugbears are an 8. Which gives you a -1 on skill checks.
Yeah, it also shows that they are not bad as trackers,
Yes.
which is what I would think. I've always pictured goblins to be more, because they're smaller, I guess. But it's okay. So, and they are of a medium size, but they're large on the medium side.
Yes. Okay.
So-
Yes. So that's, again, not too much more on them, other than they're just kind of the brutes of the group. And then the final major one is hobgoblins, and they're the brains of the operation.
Yes.
They are militaristic, they're smarter, they're disciplined, and when these three races intermingle, it is always the hobgoblins that run things. And I they're my favorite of the three, just because I like that sort of.
Is that what you play?
Yes.
You play. Okay. Yeah.
So you and I are your goblin and my hobgoblin lore. Nobody in our group has figured out his full name yet, and so that we'll see if that ever comes up if we get back to them. But yeah, so we've already kind of made it. We're half siblings, but hobgoblins run the show. But they are technically militaristic, cruel, heartless. The only thing they respect is honor, and the only way to get honor is to win in battle.
Okay.
And and that's it, full stop.
Seems very consistent with what I know about this subgroup of goblinoids. Is fighting is king.
Yeah.
Something I was noting here before we hit play on the show or record on the show, I asked you, do goblins get pack tactics? And your comment was no, they're not smart enough, or they're selfish.
They're chaotic.
They're chaotic and too selfish. But I notice here on the hobgoblin that they get something like a pack tactic. They get martial advantage. They deal extra damage to a creature with a weapon attack if that creature is within 5 feet of an alloy of the hobgoblin and isn't incapacitated.
Yes.
So they because in battle with these creatures, numbers are always king.
Yes.
Because one goblin is one goblin. They're probably going to run or try to surrender and try to get away a different way. But when there's 20 of them, that it can actually be pretty dangerous, even to a group that has some levels, especially if you throw in a hobgoblin or a bugbear into the group.
Yeah.
Because numbers do them benefit.
Yes. Yes. And so, so we've, again, the nuance we're going to talk about here in a second, it's kind of fun. I feel like we naturally drifted toward that with our role play with our two characters. Because my hobgoblin is very hard-nosed but loyal to you as a sibling, and completely disgusted with the bugbear and just wanting to beat him down into submission.
And has several times.
And it's been fun. Mark, I'll give so much credit to him for being willing to play it that way, where he eventually acknowledges, I mean, he won't say it, but acknowledges, okay, I need to follow this guy's lead.
Yep.
At least for the time being, until there's a slip.
Yeah, and then he goes back.
Yes.
He goes back, and then you guys have another tuffle.
Yeah, the minute the lore shows weakness, it's over.
Your roles are always superior to his. Always. And you're the intelligent one of the entire group, if I remember right. You have the highest intelligence of all of us. Canute has a decent wisdom, but his intelligence is tanked. It's like a 6 or a 7. So he's an idiot.
So other goblinoids that don't have a lot of information on them, we got the Barghest, the Varag, the Verdan, and anyway, there's the Barghest is in, I believe it's either Volos or Mordenkainen. Maybe it's in the monster manual, but
doesn't look like
that gets a lot less cover in the manuals and the official materials. So not much more to talk about there. So we can move on if you want to.
Yeah.
This. So first thing to note is these fall in the same category as Orc as far as the original D&D first edition. They are pretty much pulled from Tolkien.
Okay.
At least the goblins. And then hobgoblin term and all that bugbear, those come from more generally Northern European folklore as names.
Okay.
So they don't have, like, they weren't original D&D creations. They've been pulled in like orcs, like halflings, like things like that.
Okay.
And the baseline, easy, accepted origin is that they are all created by Bane, the evil god of war and conquest. That he took a race called the Dranasar and corrupted them and split them into these three groups. And he bestowed on them the curse of strife.
Okay.
Now that fits.
Yeah, it does.
But there's another hint here that, if you expand it out, becomes, I think, a lot more fascinating. And they, as you found as you were looking at the monster manual and kind of the lore, they don't give you a lot, but they say their current god is, and I don't know where the accent goes. It's either Maglubiet or Maglubiet. And that is not the god that created them.
Okay.
So we got a problem here.
Yeah.
So I did kind of look at some other, theories online, and this is, I think, where it gets kind of interesting.
Okay.
So again, I don't want to draw this out too much. I want to kind of make this as concise as possible. Maglubiet, his goal is to kill other gods and absorb their followers until he is the sole leader of the multiverse. So he doesn't.
That's ambitious.
Yes. So the way it's a little more complex. I guess I should say he wants to destroy pantheons.
Okay.
And so he'll kill whoever resists him, and if others will serve, other gods will serve, fine.
Okay.
So there's some idea that he's the one that created these three, but all he did was pull them from other gods and then warp them.
Okay.
And it goes on further that in the updated Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse, is that that goblinoids are given Fey ancestry.
Oh.
So that's a curveball.
That's interesting, yeah.
So some of the stuff I was reading said, all right, let's think about this. Fey, there's the Seelie Court and the Unseelie Court. Seelie Court are pretty, Unseelie are ugly.
Yeah. Like hags.
Yes.
Yeah.
And not necessarily evil, but tending toward that. So pretty obviously these three races were once Fey of the Unseelie Court. And if you think about that, they would serve or worship Archfey of the Unseelie Court. But if you actually go into the published lore that D&D has on Fey and Archfey, there's a number of Seelie Court Fey. There's almost none mentioned in the Unseelie Court. There's a queen of darkness and air or something like that, and Baba Yaga and a couple others, but that's about it. So you connect the dots. Maglubiet may have killed most of the Unseelie Archfey, grabbed those three races and dragged them into the material plane to serve him.
So all the lore that we have is post that. I mean, it'd be kind of neat to find lore, or if lore has been created, of what happened potentially. If that is the case,
yes.
Like what were the gods of those prior to being.
And so here's the tragedy then, is if once you flesh all that out, these three races become the ultimate victims.
Yeah.
Because they've been, like Tolkien's orcs, they have been taken and twisted and wrecked by an evil god. And so there is the potential, and I feel like that's the way we're kind of playing it in our monster campaign. There is the potential still for motives and emotions that are not pure evil,
right,
in these creatures. Their societies have been twisted to where that tends to be squished out of them, and this Maglubiet himself would have through natural selection, wiped out any members of these races that weren't evil.
Okay, I'm just putting all this together in my head, and it really works well because we're playing them as player characters, these creatures, and how there are layers too, so to speak. The onion would fit well with these creatures, but there's layers that you could uncover that might bring out heritage.
Yeah.
And that's basically what you're saying. But I'm just trying to think of how that could be played out as a player character through one of these. That the experience brings more awareness.
I stumbled across that accidentally. I'm not taking any credit at all for this, other than it was just a random thing I thought would be fun for my Hobgoblin, which is he likes flowers. And so when he sees them, he'll pick them and then kind of crush them, flatten them in a book.
Right. Yeah.
So he's got them, and he's very, very touchy about that. And
Yeah, like you do that now, right?
Yes.
Yes. That's what I thought. Yeah.
He doesn't want people to know. And as I was reading this, I thought, oh, that could be sort of a Fey ancestry thing that slipped through.
And you just did that on accident?
Yeah. Like, cool. That works. That's kind of fitting. I
That
like
is
it.
Great. Yes.
So it does make them, again, sort of tragic characters, and it does, add. I think some old school folks get a little frustrated with D&D that, oh gosh, everybody's got a backstory now. Everybody's nice. There's no bad guys to kill.
I was just going to say, now I'm feeling kind of guilty for using them the way I've used them as a DM. Just throw them out there, meat shields.
But I think I got to say, I think that's the way D&D has always been played. I think everybody, you find the table that you're comfortable with. And there are tables that want to see it as a very much good or evil world, which is in a way the way Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings.
Right.
And, there's a lot of value in that. Play that. That's fine. But there are also a lot of tables that kind of like to ask, what if?
Right.
I myself, to be perfectly blunt, tend to fall into the camp of, oh my gosh, don't water stuff down. Just let the drow be an evil culture. But then I'm the one that introduced a good drow to you guys.
Right.
So,
Is that an admittance? I can trust him now.
150 years on in the game. So that, I think that, people do that anyway.
I don't know. I guess I look at it as if you're looking for like the explanation of why do we do this? I mean, to me, the Tolkien good and evil it's a time of war. So it's a war mentality. You're good or you're bad, and the backstory doesn't matter because you're against me. But then you could look at it on the peaceful or non-war era and say, okay, generally these guys are bad. They've been portrayed as being evil. Their actions support it, but they do have a tragic story to them. And in the time of peace, or at least the time of acceptance or whatever in the game, there might be a little bit more of a layer to it. Now, if they want to act chaotic and they want to attack you as a group, I'm going to slaughter you. But if you give us, the player characters, a chance, we will have a conversation with you. So I think there really are two sort of sides to what is the time period saying about good and evil? Is it war, a battle against good or bad, or is it a peaceful time where kingdoms are trying to settle things down? And I'm trying to think. In the Waterdeep world that we play in, that's more of a time of peace and acceptance and when I say peace, I don't mean like everything is hunky-dory, but you don't have massive groups of evil trying to take over.
Right.
You go to Drizzt Do'Urden era that R.A. Salvatore writes of the Forgotten Realms, that's war. And Drizzt Do'Urden is a drow, and people don't trust him as a drow because the drow are evil. I think he's dealing with that in more contemporary books, but it's a time of war. And so, I don't know, I'm kind of blabbering now, but I think in my head, that makes sense. I don't worry about backstories when it's a massive battle, but I worry about backstories when it's role play and you're trying to do things without drawing a sword.
Well, that really kind of, again, not to wade into waters that are too deep for our purpose of our show here, but I think you see that in real life history.
Sure.
You know, that there was a very big difference between, well, I don't know how to say it, but, you know, World War II, fighting the Nazis, they are evil.
Right.
That is a culture that is twisted and evil. Are there, you know, an individual soldier, if you took him as a prisoner of war, would he just be raving and evil and want it? No, not necessarily.
Right.
He might be a true believer in that philosophy, and you would not be able to really interact with him other than control or remove.
Right.
But you might find a German soldier that just got caught up in what he thought was doing the right thing or was drafted.
Right.
You know, I think
Beyond choice.
Yeah,
correct.
See that today in, you know, the Russian army that is devastating Ukraine is poorly trained and brutal. And if we wanted to pull that into a role play world, you'd be much more likely to find a soldier from that group just brutish and not open to any kind of role play, whereas there are other forces that you know you would.
So I guess what we take that to is you know the traditional belief of don't water this down is this gives you more opportunity to make the game deeper. You can stay at a certain level, or you can bring the reality of it into it and play those sorts of things if you want to. And which is what this is all about, is role playing. And when we've talked about, now this steps into another realm that we've discussed before, and that is, what are the benefits of role play? You know, sometimes role play helps you to understand the world around you, just like you were explaining. You know, I might be playing in a setting where I can go and I can say, actually, the behavior of the people that are attacking us doesn't seem too far off from X event in history or current times. And so it helps you to have an understanding of the world around you, perhaps. And we just use monsters instead of other people as sort of the role, the players.
You get a chance to work out. And again, I think that's what's been interesting in our groups, the groups I've played in. There are situations that you rush into, your characters rush into, and you start to deal with it in a certain way. And then you as a person, as a player, this doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to try doing this, even though in real life I'd be far too scared to offer that person this olive branch.
Exactly.
And I think that's powerful.
So I didn't really think we'd get here with a conversation of goblins.
No.
But I think what you said though about them gives them layers. They're not just a fodder. Yeah. They're not just nasty evil creatures. You can play them that way, but you can also really do something a little bit deeper with goblins and goblinoids if you want to go that route. And I think that's cool. Personally, I like that for my game. Like you said, I've always tried to give character to goblins for some reason. I don't know why, but this gives me more purpose behind doing that.
Yeah.
And even if they are acting like a fool, well, they're a fool because they're a fool. They're evil because they're foolish. Could you change? Could you make someone smarter? Could you change a goblin's ways? As a group, probably not, but as individuals or a small little group, maybe so. You could show them the light. And so, I don't know, lots to work with here in the world of goblins and goblinoids. Well, thank you so much for doing the research on that. Did you have anything, final thought to share that you hadn't had a chance to?
No, but you pointed out the fact there is a depth and a richness that I didn't really expect as we started this conversation. But I think that is yet another reason that makes this game so cool, and why another reason that attracts people to it is you're not just rolling dice and moving pieces.
Right.
And as fun as Monopoly can be, there's a lot going on here, and it is fun in and of its own right to have your characters wrestle with these dilemmas that are real life dilemmas.
Right. It's a deep and complicated game, or it can be a deep and complicated game, but that's the joy of it. That is the joy of it. So speaking of joy, this has been a joy talking to you about this. And once again, thank you for doing the research on it. You've really kind of given me some things to mull over as a dungeon master I do like to use goblins in all levels, whether it's an experienced group or an inexperienced group. And so it gives me some things to think about moving forward. Hopefully you listening were able to get some ideas out of this conversation about goblins and goblinoids. That's why we do it.
Yes.
To add layers to our monsters and our creatures that we encounter in our games. So if you have encountered a goblin in the past that worked in a way that you weren't quite expecting, let us know about that. We'd love to hear about the stories of encountering goblins, because sometimes it can be amusing, sometimes it can be a bloodbath, and sometimes it can be really enlightening.
I thought you were going to say both.
Or both.
An amusing bloodbath.
Or everything. But no, let us know if you've had some sort of cool encounters or if you used goblins in unique ways as well. We mentioned all the ways to get in touch with us in the opening, but again, an email is teachersinthedungeon@gmail.com. So for Dan, for the goblins in the room, and for Tom, that's me, this is Teachers in the Dungeon. Until next week, keep rolling those 20s.